December 19th, 1944, 4:47 in the morning, Ardennes Forest, Belgium. The cold bit through 3 layers of wool like they were tissue paper. 8 degrees Fahrenheit. The kind of cold that turned your breath into instant fog, that made metal burn when it touched bare skin, that killed you slowly if you stayed still long enough. Private First Class Vincent Romano had been still for nearly 3 hours. 40 feet above the frozen ground, wedged into the crook of a massive oak tree, he watched 23 German soldiers materialize out of the pre-dawn mist below. They moved in a loose tactical column down the logging road, their Feldgrau uniforms making them look like ghosts drifting through the snow-covered forest. Romano's right eye pressed against the Weaver 330 scope mounted on his M1903A4 Springfield rifle. The weapon was a masterpiece of American precision engineering. A modified bolt-action rifle built at Springfield Armory, it featured a specially selected barrel that guaranteed accuracy to 800 yards. The scope, manufactured by Weaver in Texas, offered 3-power magnification with a post and crosshair reticle calibrated for the .30-06 cartridge. The German paused in the middle of the road, cupped his hands, struck a match. Romano's finger found the trigger. The mathematics were simple. 830 yards to target. Wind negligible, maybe 3 miles per hour left to right. Temperature so cold the air was dense, which meant the bullet would fly slightly faster than normal. The German was stationary, lighting a cigarette, completely unaware that death was watching him through glass lenses from across 2 football fields. Romano exhaled slowly, squeezed. The Springfield bucked against his shoulder with familiar authority. The report cracked across the frozen forest like breaking ice. 830 yards away, the German soldier collapsed sideways into the snow. The cigarette fell from his lips, still burning, melting a tiny hole in the white powder beside his outstretched hand. 22 soldiers remained. Romano was already working the bolt, smooth and mechanical. The empty brass cartridge ejected, spinning in the frigid air before disappearing into the snow 40 feet below. A fresh round chambered with a metallic click that was lost in the forest silence. He didn't know it yet, but that single shot would start a count that would terrorize an entire SS regiment, violate every standing order the United States Army had written about sniper employment, and prove that sometimes the most dangerous weapon in war isn't the one firing the most bullets. It's the one that absolutely refuses to move. The remaining Germans scattered like startled deer. Training kicked in. They dove for cover on both sides of the road, weapons coming up, eyes scanning the hillside for muzzle flash. But there was nothing to see. The sound of the shot bounced off the trees, making triangulation impossible. The muzzle flash at this range in the dim dawn light was invisible. They had no idea where death had come from. Romano waited. Patience. The lesson from hunting pigeons on Brooklyn rooftops. Move too fast, they scatter. Stay absolutely still, and they forget you exist. 23 minutes later, they came back. 15 German soldiers appeared from the north, advancing cautiously down the same road. An NCO was directing them with hand signals, pointing at the hillside, trying to calculate where the shot had originated. They'd worked out the general direction, south, uphill, but nothing precise. Classic mistake. The soldiers clustered together, examining their dead comrade, trying to determine the bullet's trajectory. Good soldiers would have spread out. These soldiers bunched up, seeking comfort in numbers. Romano fired into the cluster. One dropped instantly. The others exploded outward like shrapnel, diving for cover, returning blind fire toward the hillside. Their bullets hit nowhere near Romano's actual position, 300 yards to the west of where they were shooting. He worked methodically. Second shot, third, fourth. 3 more Germans fell before the survivors broke and ran north, leaving their dead behind. 9 kills, 10 total shots fired. The morning was just beginning. What those German soldiers didn't understand, what their commanders wouldn't understand for another 2 days, was that they weren't facing normal American sniper tactics. They were facing something that every manual, every doctrine, every bit of training said was suicide. Standard United States Army sniper protocol was absolute and unambiguous: shoot and relocate. Never fire more than 3 shots from one position. Enemy counter-snipers triangulate muzzle flash. Counter-battery observers call in mortars. Artillery zeroes in on static positions. Stay in one place and you die. The doctrine had been written in blood. Romano had watched it proven again and again during 7 months of combat across Europe. Private Miller had taken 4 shots from a church bell tower outside Aachen. A German 88mm artillery shell erased the entire tower 16 minutes later. They found pieces of Miller scattered across 2 city blocks. Corporal Sullivan fired from a barn loft near Stolberg. Mortar barrage collapsed the building. The recovery detail needed shovels, not stretchers. The message was crystal clear: mobility equals survival. But Vincent Romano, 21 years old, son of a Brooklyn dock worker, had spent the previous night making a calculation that every instructor at sniper school would have called insane. He was going to violate every rule. He was going to stay in this tree for as long as it took. He was going to turn this single oak into the most dangerous 100 square feet in the entire Ardennes forest. And if German mortars found him, if counter-snipers pinpointed his position, if artillery turned this tree into splinters and his body into pink mist, well, that was the price. Because 40 feet below him, running through this frozen Belgian forest, was a logging road that the 12th SS Panzer Division was using as a supply route. Every squad that walked that road carried ammunition forward to German units attacking American positions. Every courier brought orders. Every half-track transported reinforcements. Kill enough soldiers on that road, disrupt their timetable enough, and maybe, just maybe, American reinforcements would arrive before the German offensive broke through completely. The mathematics were brutal. Romano had 6 days of ammunition in his position, 20 rounds per day maximum if he was disciplined. That meant 120 shots, total. Even assuming perfect accuracy, which was impossible, he could kill at most 120 Germans. The 12th SS Panzer Division had over 20,000 men. But those 20,000 men all needed supplies, and supplies moved on roads, and roads could be made unusable if the cost of using them became too high. Romano wasn't trying to stop a division. He was trying to make one road too expensive to use. By sunset on December 18th, he'd fired 34 rounds and achieved 29 confirmed kills. The logging road sat empty, not a single German soldier visible, no traffic, no movement. The word was already spreading through SS units in the sector: don't use the logging road. There's something in those woods, something that kills everything that moves. The story of how a Brooklyn dockworker's son became the ghost in the trees began 3 years earlier, 3,000 miles away, on tenement rooftops where pigeons were worth 15 cents each. Vincent Romano grew up in Red Hook, Brooklyn, 3 blocks from the waterfront where cargo ships from around the world unloaded their goods. His father, Salvatore, worked those docks for 30 years, hauling crates in summer heat and winter cold for $1.50 a day. His mother, Maria, cleaned offices in Manhattan, taking the subway at 5 in the morning and returning after dark. The neighborhood produced a predictable crop: boxers, longshoremen, and criminals. Vincent became something different. By age 12, he was hunting pigeons with a borrowed .22 caliber rifle. Not for sport, for money. Restaurants in Manhattan paid 15 cents per bird. A good afternoon on the rooftops could earn him $1.20, nearly a full day's wages for his father. But hunting pigeons taught lessons that no military manual could match. Pigeons have exceptional eyesight. Move too quickly and they scatter before you get within range. Make noise and they're gone. Even your shadow crossing their peripheral vision sends them airborne. Vincent learned to move like stone, to wait for hours without shifting position, to control his breathing so his chest didn't rise and fall noticeably, to squeeze a trigger so smoothly that the rifle fired without disturbing his aim. By 14, he could hit a tin can at 200 yards with iron sights. By 16, he was studying ballistics without knowing the word. He noticed how heat shimmer at midday made distances deceptive, how wind pushed bullets in ways that weren't intuitive, how cold air made sounds travel differently than warm air. While other kids played stickball in the streets below, Vincent Romano sat on rooftops and learned patience. The skill would save his life in Belgium. He enlisted 3 days after Pearl Harbor, December 10th, 1941, age 19. The recruiter took one look at his build, 5'9", 145 pounds, wiry and strong from dock work, and sent him to infantry. The army noticed his shooting scores immediately. At basic training in Fort Dix, New Jersey, every recruit qualified with the M1 Garand rifle. The standard was hitting a man-sized target at 300 yards. Most recruits were happy to hit the target at all. Romano put every single shot inside the bullseye. The range instructor, a sergeant from Texas who'd been shooting his whole life, watched Romano's qualification and made a phone call. 2 weeks later, Romano received orders to sniper school at Camp Perry, Ohio. Camp Perry sat on the southern shore of Lake Erie, 700 acres of rifle ranges and training facilities. The Army had established its sniper program there in 1942, desperately trying to match the Germans who had perfected the art on the Eastern Front. The course lasted 8 weeks. Out of 60 students, 42 graduated. 18 failed or washed out, unable to handle the mental pressure of being alone, of making life-or-death decisions without officers telling them what to do. The instructors taught more than shooting. They taught fieldcraft, how to move invisibly through terrain, camouflage, how to become part of the landscape, range estimation, calculating distance without instruments, wind reading, judging speed and direction from grass movement and tree sway. But most of all, they taught doctrine. Shoot and relocate, the chief instructor, Captain Howard Matthews, repeated until it was burned into every student's brain. 3 shots maximum from any position, then you move, always move. Matthews had fought in the First World War. He'd seen what happened to snipers who stayed in position too long. German counter-snipers were among the best in the world. They'd triangulate your position from muzzle flash, sound, or even the disturbance of your bullet passing through air. Once they had you located, you had maybe 15 minutes before artillery made that location irrelevant. Romano listened, took notes, qualified at the top of his class. But he also understood something the instructors didn't emphasize. Doctrine was written for open battlefields, for static trench warfare like the Western Front in 1917, for situations where both sides had established positions and counter-sniper teams. It wasn't written for desperate defensive battles in dense forest against overwhelming force. He kept this observation to himself. By December 1944, Romano had been in Europe 7 months. He'd landed at Normandy on June 12th, 6 days after D-Day, when the beaches were still being shelled and the hedgerows inland had become a meat grinder. He'd fought through Saint-Lô in July, where American forces needed 5 weeks and 11,000 casualties to advance 7 miles. He'd been in the Hurtgen forest in November, where trees burst into deadly splinters under artillery fire, and men died without ever seeing the enemy. 38 confirmed kills, good numbers for a sniper, solid professional work. He'd followed doctrine religiously, shoot and relocate, never more than 3 shots from one position. He'd seen what happened to snipers who got comfortable, who thought they'd found the perfect hide and decided to exploit it. They died. Then came December 16th, 1944. Hitler's final gamble. Operation Wacht am Rhein, Watch on the Rhine. The last major German offensive in the West. The Germans hit with 28 divisions against 4 American divisions spread across an 80-mile front. In the opening 6 hours, 41 German battalions struck 7 American battalions. The mathematics were brutal, roughly 6-to-1 odds. The American lines shattered. Romano's unit, part of the 99th Infantry Division, held positions near the Belgian-German border. They called themselves the Battle Babies. The division had only arrived in Europe in November and hadn't seen major combat yet. The veterans from Normandy and the Hurtgen took one look at these fresh-faced replacements and shook their heads. These kids had no idea what was coming. Romano was one of the veterans, 7 months in combat, ancient by replacement standards. When the German artillery barrage began at 5:30 on the morning of December 16th, it sounded like the world ending. 800 German guns firing simultaneously. Shells falling so thick the ground shook continuously. Trees exploding into splinters, foxholes collapsing. Then came the infantry. Thousands of Germans in winter-white camouflage appearing out of the fog like ghosts. The 99th Infantry Division's lines bent, fractured, and in some places broke completely. Small groups of American soldiers found themselves cut off, surrounded, isolated behind rapidly advancing German forces. Romano's squad, 12 men led by Sergeant Patrick O'Brien, retreated into dense forest south of Rocherath. They dug in on a hillside with good defensive positions and clear fields of fire overlooking a logging road. That's when Romano saw the Germans. Not Wehrmacht regulars, not the tired, middle-aged conscripts Germany was fielding by late 1944. These were SS. 12th SS Panzer Division, Hitler Jugend, Hitler Youth. Fanatics. The average age was 19. They'd been in Hitler Youth since childhood, thoroughly indoctrinated in Nazi ideology. They believed in final victory even as Germany crumbled. They took no prisoners and expected none. And they were using the logging road below Romano's position as a supply route. He watched them all day on December 17th, counted 47 German soldiers using the road during daylight hours, reconnaissance squads, motorcycle couriers, an officer's staff car at noon moving south toward American positions. They moved casually, rifles slung, talking, smoking. This far behind their own lines, they felt safe. Romano studied them through his scope, noticed patterns, groups of 4 to 8 men every 45 to 60 minutes. No flank security, no scouts, just soldiers walking down a road, completely unaware they were being watched. Standard doctrine said do nothing, stay hidden, let the Germans pass, wait for American lines to stabilize, then slip back to friendly positions. But Romano saw something else. That logging road was a German artery. Every squad using it brought ammunition, orders and intelligence forward. Every vehicle transported supplies. Shut down that road and German units ahead would run short. They'd have to reroute, adding time to their advance. Maybe enough time for American reinforcements to arrive. But shutting down the road required violating every rule he'd been taught. He'd have to stay in one position for days, not hours. Fire dozens of shots from the same location. Wait for German counter-snipers to find him. Wait for mortars to zero in. Wait for artillery to turn his position into a crater. Wait to die. That night, December 17th going into December 18th, Romano approached Sergeant O'Brien. O'Brien was 32 years old, ancient for an infantry sergeant. He'd worked construction in South Boston before the war, building the same kind of tough, no-nonsense structures he now defended. He took no garbage from officers and less from Germans. Romano respected him. "The logging road," Romano said quietly. "I can shut it down." O'Brien looked at him in the darkness. They were huddled in a foxhole, speaking in whispers. German positions were close enough to hear normal conversation. "Sniper doctrine says shoot and move," O'Brien replied. "Doctrine was written for different circumstances. You stay in one spot, they'll find you. Mortars, artillery, counter-sniper. You'll be dead by noon." "Maybe," Romano admitted, "but I can make that road unusable, force them to find another route, slow their advance." O'Brien pulled out a cigarette. Didn't light it. Flame would give away their position. He just held it, thinking. "How many shots you thinking?" "As many as it takes. Command says 3 shots maximum from one position." "Command isn't here." O'Brien studied him for a long moment. The forest was silent except for distant artillery rumbling like thunder. You understand what you're proposing? Court-martial offense, disobeying standing orders. Assuming we survive long enough for a court-martial. I understand. And you want to do it anyway? Yes. O'Brien finally lit the cigarette, cupping his hand so the glow wouldn't show. Took a long drag. I'll deny this conversation happened. You do what you think is right. But if they come for you with mortars, you're on your own. I can't spare men to pull you out. Romano nodded. Understood. He spent 2 hours that night preparing his position. The oak tree stood 60 yards behind the squad's defensive positions, massive and ancient. Romano estimated it at 200 years old, maybe older. The trunk was 4 feet in diameter. The branches spread 40 feet above the ground, thick enough to support a man's weight. He climbed in absolute darkness. Every movement was calculated. Test each branch before committing weight, feel for stability, check sightlines. The Germans were close enough that any noise, a breaking branch, a scrape of boot on bark, could bring a patrol. 20 feet up, he found what he needed. 3 branches intersected at nearly right angles, creating a natural platform roughly 3 feet by 4 feet. The wide trunk sat directly behind it, providing cover from counterfire. Smaller branches surrounded the position, perfect for camouflage. And most importantly, the sight lines were flawless. From this position, 830 yards to the logging road. Clear field of fire, no obstructions. The road ran roughly north-south through his field of view, meaning targets would present themselves in profile for maximum exposure time. Romano tied himself to the trunk with parachute cord. If he fell asleep from exhaustion or hypothermia, the cord would keep him from plunging 40 feet to his death. He arranged pine boughs around his position, creating a nest that broke up his human outline. Stacked 20 rounds of 30-06 ammunition within easy reach, positioned his canteen, field rations, and extra wool blanket. The platform measured 3 feet by 4 feet, 12 square feet. He would live in that space for the next 3 days. His hands shook as he worked. Not from cold, though the temperature was already dropping below freezing. From understanding. If German mortars found this position, the tree would become his coffin. 40 feet up with no quick escape. High explosive shells would turn the oak into splinters and Romano into meat. The shrapnel would shred him before his body hit the ground. But the alternative was watching Germans use that road freely, bringing up reinforcements, extending the offensive, killing more Americans. He joined this war to kill Germans. Time to do it efficiently. December 18th, 1944, 6:23 in the morning. First light crept through the forest like a cautious animal. Romano had been in position since 4:15, waiting in absolute darkness, watching the road through memory rather than sight. Frost covered everything. His breath created fog clouds that hung in the still air before slowly dissipating. He'd wrapped his face in wool, except for his eyes, covered his scope lens with cloth until needed, minimized every visible signature. Body heat was the enemy. In freezing temperatures, a warm body created rising air that disturbed the frost on branches above. Experienced German scouts could spot these disturbances from hundreds of yards away. Romano had learned to breathe shallowly, to move only his eyes, to become part of the tree. The first Germans appeared at 6:47. 6 soldiers moving south down the road in loose formation, SS by their insignia, the distinctive lightning bolts on their collars. Young men, probably 18 or 19, veterans of the Eastern Front by their casual movement. Men who'd survived the meat grinder of Russia weren't afraid of Belgium's quiet forests. Rifles slung over shoulders, 1 soldier smoking, 2 others laughing about something, their voices carrying clearly across the frozen air. Casual, behind their own lines, safe from American interference. Romano let them get to the middle of his field of view, 830 yards by his practiced estimation. He removed the cloth from his scope, moving with glacial slowness. Even this small motion could catch a soldier's peripheral vision. Through the 3-power magnification, he acquired the lead soldier, a kid with blonde hair visible under his helmet, probably from Bavaria or Austria by his build. The kind of young German who'd grown up in Hitler Youth, who believed in final victory, who thought Americans were soft and weak. Romano adjusted for wind. Minimal. Maybe 3 miles per hour left to right, not enough to matter at this range. He exhaled slowly, let half the breath out, held it. Squeezed. The Springfield rifle bucked against his shoulder with familiar authority. The .30-06 cartridge fired with a flat crack that echoed across the forest. Recoil sent the rifle up and back, but Romano's grip kept it on target. 830 yards away, the German soldier dropped like someone had cut his strings. Center mass hit. The impact spun him sideways into the snow, where he lay motionless, the cigarette still burning beside his outstretched hand. The other 5 Germans reacted with trained efficiency. They scattered instantly, diving into the snow on both sides of the road, weapons coming up, eyes scanning for threats. But they were looking in the wrong direction. Sound distortion in cold air was Romano's ally. The shot's crack bounced off trees, creating multiple false echoes. The Germans were shooting at the hillside 300 yards east of Romano's actual position, their bullets snapping through empty forest. Romano was already working the bolt. Smooth, mechanical. The empty brass cartridge ejected, spinning golden in the morning light before falling 40 feet into the snow below. A fresh round chambered with a metallic snick that was lost in the Germans' blind return fire. Second target acquired. A soldier crouched behind a fallen log, head and shoulders visible, trying to spot the sniper's position. Romano fired. The soldier fell backward into a drainage ditch, his helmet spinning away across the frozen road. 4 remaining. They were panicking now, discipline breaking down. 2 ran north back toward German lines. 1 tried to drag the first body to cover. 1 stayed frozen behind his log, too terrified to move or retreat. Romano took his time. 3rd shot hit the soldier attempting the body recovery. 4th shot missed. The frozen soldier had finally moved at the last instant, throwing off Romano's lead. 5th shot caught him as he ran. 2 left, both sprinting north, putting trees between themselves and death. Romano led the first runner by 3 feet. The bullet caught him mid-stride, and he tumbled forward into the snow like a rag doll. The last soldier made it around a bend in the road, disappearing into the forest. 5 kills, 6 shots, 90 seconds of work. Romano waited. The forest returned to silence. Birds had scattered at the first shot, but were slowly returning, their calls resuming. A rabbit hopped across the logging road, pausing to sniff at the bodies before moving on. Nature didn't care about human warfare. 23 minutes later, 15 German soldiers appeared from the north. These were different. They advanced tactically, using cover, weapons ready. An NCO directed them with hand signals, pointing at the hillside where he thought the shots had originated. They'd calculated approximate direction, but nothing precise. Romano let them reach the bodies. Human psychology was predictable. Soldiers wanted to recover their dead, to give their comrades dignity. The Germans clustered around the fallen, examining wounds, trying to determine bullet trajectories. Amateur mistake. Good soldiers spread out to avoid presenting concentrated targets. These soldiers bunched up. Romano fired into the cluster. 1 dropped instantly. The others exploded outward like shrapnel from a grenade, finally doing what they should have done from the start, spreading out, finding individual cover. But Romano was already working. 2nd shot, 3rd, 4th. 3 more Germans fell before the survivors broke and ran north, leaving their dead behind. 9 kills from this group, 10 total shots fired. The morning was young. The Germans tried 3 more times that day. Each attempt was larger and more cautious than the last. At 10:15, 20 German soldiers advanced in a proper skirmish line, 20 yards between each man. Romano picked off the NCO first, leadership elimination. The formation collapsed into confusion without direction. He killed 4 more before they retreated. At 1:30 in the afternoon, 30 soldiers tried to rush the road in a single mass movement. Romano fired as fast as he could work the bolt. 11 fell before the others made it to cover on the far side. They didn't try to advance further, just hunkered down and waited for darkness. At 4:45, as daylight faded, a final group of 12 soldiers attempted to recover bodies under covering fire from machine guns positioned in the woods. Romano killed the machine gunners first, 2 shots, both weapons silenced. Then he systematically eliminated the recovery team, 8 dead before they abandoned the attempt. By sunset on December 18th, Romano had fired 34 rounds and achieved 29 confirmed kills. The logging road was empty. Not a single German soldier visible, no traffic, no movement, just bodies in the snow and the smell of cordite hanging in the frozen air. That night, Sergeant O'Brien climbed up to Romano's position with water and rations. "You're fucking insane," O'Brien said, handing up a canteen. "You know that?" "Probably," Romano replied. His hands were so stiff from cold, he could barely grip the canteen. "They'll figure out where you are eventually. Bring up mortars." "Maybe." "No maybe about it. Question is how long you last." Romano ate cold K rations, his fingers too numb to work the can opener properly. O'Brien had to help him. "How long are you planning to stay up here?" O'Brien asked. Romano looked at the empty road below, barely visible in the gathering darkness. "As long as it takes." O'Brien followed his gaze. 29 bodies lay scattered across 200 yards of road. In the morning, the Germans would have to do something about them. They couldn't leave that many dead just lying there. It was bad for morale, bad for logistics, bad for everything. Which meant they'd be back. "You shut down their supply route," O'Brien said quietly. "That's something." "It's a start." O'Brien climbed back down, leaving Romano alone in his tree with the darkness and the cold and the knowledge that tomorrow would be worse. Because now the Germans knew someone was hunting them. Now they'd come prepared. Now they'd bring counter-snipers, mortars, maybe even artillery. Now it would get interesting. Romano wrapped himself in his wool blanket and settled in for the night. The temperature was dropping towards 0. His feet were already numb, his hands barely functioned. Hypothermia was a real possibility. But the road below remained empty. And empty roads didn't supply German offensives. December 19th, 1944. 4:47 in the morning. Romano had spent the entire night in the tree. The temperature had dropped to 4 degrees Fahrenheit. His feet had gone completely numb around 2 in the morning. His hands barely responded to mental commands. The early stages of hypothermia were setting in. He knew the signs from training. Confusion, drowsiness, slurred thinking. He was dying slowly from exposure. But he stayed. The Germans came at dawn. 23 soldiers this time, advancing in proper tactical formation. Skirmish line with 20-yard spacing between each man, using available cover, moving carefully, weapons ready, an officer directing them with hand signals, staying low. These were better trained than yesterday's groups, probably veterans from the Eastern Front, where the Soviets had taught the Wehrmacht hard lessons about casualties. Romano waited until they committed to crossing his kill zone. The officer was good. He'd positioned himself in the middle of the formation where he was hardest to target. Romano shot him anyway. The officer collapsed. Leadership elimination. The formation immediately lost cohesion, soldiers looking around frantically for direction. Romano worked left to right across the skirmish line. Fired. Worked the bolt. Acquired the next target. Fired. Smooth. Mechanical. Pigeon hunting on Brooklyn rooftops, just different scale. 7 down before they identified his general direction. Return fire started hitting the trees around him. Branches exploded into splinters, bark fragments filled the air. A round passed 6 inches from his head, close enough to hear the supersonic crack. Romano kept firing. 11 down. 12. The survivors broke, running for cover. Romano tracked the runners, leading them by the right amount, firing. 15 down. 16. 7 escaped. 16 kills. 21 shots. His hands were shaking now, not from fear but from cold and adrenaline combined. He reloaded with fingers that barely bent, arranged fresh ammunition where he could reach it, and waited. The Germans changed tactics. At 8:30 in the morning, a machine gun team appeared 850 yards north on the logging road. Romano watched through his scope as two soldiers wrestled an MG-42 into position behind a fallen log. The German machine gun was a masterpiece of engineering, capable of firing 1,200 rounds per minute. It created a sound like ripping cloth that terrified American infantry. The Germans called it Hitlersage, Hitler's saw. The plan was obvious. Suppress Romano's position with automatic fire while infantry flanked through the forest. Smart tactics, textbook counter-sniper procedure. Romano fired before they got the weapon positioned. The gunner collapsed across the MG-42, his body weight tilting the weapon sideways. The assistant gunner grabbed for the gun, trying to bring it into action. Romano fired again. Both soldiers down. But now the Germans had a precise fix on his location. He'd fired from the same tree for 36 hours. Every muzzle flash, every sound, every tiny piece of evidence had given them better triangulation data. At 11:17 in the morning, the mortars came. Romano heard them launch. 4 tubes, probably 81 millimeter. The distinctive thump, 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 thump carried clearly across the frozen forest. Flight time approximately 12 seconds at this range. Romano pressed himself against the oak trunk, made himself as small as possible, and prayed to a god he hadn't spoken to since childhood. The first salvo hit 40 yards short. 4 explosions sent snow and frozen earth geysering upward. Shrapnel whined through the air, shredding smaller trees. The concussion wave hit Romano's tree like a physical blow, shaking loose frost and pine needles. The Germans were walking their fire toward his position. Standard mortar procedure. Fire, observe, adjust, fire again. Second salvo hit 20 yards short. Closer. Tree branches above Romano disintegrated. The massive oak shook from concussion. His ears rang so badly he couldn't hear anything except a high-pitched whine. Third salvo should hit him directly. He waited. 15 seconds, 30 seconds. No more mortars. Later, he'd learned that American counter-battery radar had picked up the German mortar positions and called in 105mm artillery. The German mortar crews had evacuated before completing their fire mission, unwilling to die for one American sniper. Luck. Pure luck. The rest of December 19th passed quietly. No German traffic on the road, no probing attacks. Just silence and cold, and Romano alone in his tree, slowly freezing to death. Sergeant O'Brien climbed up that night with more water and rations. "They tried to kill you with mortars," O'Brien said. "I noticed." "You're staying up here anyway?" "Yes." "Why?" Romano looked at the empty road below, barely visible in the darkness. 29 bodies from yesterday, 16 more from today. 45 German soldiers who would never deliver supplies, never carry ammunition forward, never reinforce their attacking units. "Because it's working." O'Brien studied him in the darkness. Romano's face was grey with cold. Ice crystals hung from his eyebrows and the wool covering his mouth. His hands shook constantly now, unable to control the tremors. "You're dying up here," O'Brien said quietly. "Maybe." "Not maybe. Hypothermia. Another night in this cold and you won't wake up." "Then I better make tomorrow count." O'Brien wanted to order him down, should have ordered him down, but they both understood the mathematics. That empty road was saving American lives somewhere down the line. German units that should have been resupplied weren't. Attacks that should have been reinforced couldn't be. All because one Brooklyn kid with a rifle had made a single road too expensive to use. "You're the craziest bastard I've ever met," O'Brien said. "Every day," Romano replied, the ghost of a smile in his voice. December 20th, 1944, 7:34 in the morning. Romano had been in position for 64 hours. He couldn't feel his feet. His hands barely responded to commands. Hypothermia had progressed beyond the early stages. He knew the symptoms from training: confusion, drowsiness, slurred mental processing. His thoughts moved slowly, like wading through mud. He was dying. But the road remained empty. No German traffic, no resupply, no reinforcements. He'd shut down an entire supply route through sheer persistence and violence. At 7:34, the Germans made their final attempt. 41 soldiers appeared on the logging road, full platoon strength, supported by two SDK FZ251 half-tracks mounting MG-42 machine guns. They came fast, trying to rush through the kill zone before Romano could engage effectively. Romano started firing before they entered optimal range. 900 yards, shots landing in the lead elements. Soldiers fell. The half-tracks accelerated, their mounted machine guns firing at the hillside, suppressive fire filling the air with bullets. Romano ignored the incoming rounds, focused on targets, fired, worked the bolt, fired. The first half-track reached the cluster of bodies from previous engagements, the German dead that still littered the road because no one had been able to recover them. Romano put 3 rounds through the driver's vision port. The half-track swerved violently, crashed into a tree, stopped. Soldiers poured out the back. Romano killed 4 before they reached cover. The second half-track kept coming, its machine gunner hosing the forest with automatic fire. Romano could hear bullets snapping through branches around him, but he stayed focused. He acquired the gunner, visible behind his weapon shield. Fired. Miss. The half-track hit a bump at the wrong moment. Fired again. Hit. The machine gun fell silent. Now it was infantry only. 41 soldiers reduced to maybe 28. Disorganized, taking cover wherever terrain offered protection. Their attack had failed before it truly began. They were pinned. Romano kept shooting. 27, 26, 23. At 8:09 in the morning, the survivors retreated north, dragging wounded, leaving their dead. Romano counted 18 bodies visible on the road. The attack had cost the Germans at least 25 casualties, probably more. The logging road was finished, unusable, littered with corpses, burned vehicles, and the psychological weight of a position that killed everything approaching it. Romano had won. At 2:47 in the afternoon, American reinforcements from the 2nd Infantry Division reached Sergeant O'Brien's position. The German offensive in this sector had stalled, partly from fuel shortages, partly from American resistance, partly from one sniper who'd made a single road too costly to use. Romano climbed down from his tree at 3:15, December 20th, 1944. He'd spent 72 hours and 28 minutes in that oak, fired 114 rounds, achieved 87 confirmed kills, violated every doctrine the United States Army had written about sniper employment. His legs collapsed when he touched ground. O'Brien caught him. "You did it, you crazy bastard." Romano said nothing, just stared at his hands, still gripping the Springfield rifle, unable to let go. The debriefing happened the next day in a farmhouse 5 miles west. Romano sat across a table from Captain James Buchanan and Major Harold Steinberg. They went through the engagement methodically, position selection, fields of fire, kill counts per day. When Romano finished, the room fell silent. "You violated direct orders," Steinberg finally said. "Under normal circumstances, that's court-martial territory." Romano nodded. He'd expected this. "However," Steinberg continued, 87 enemy casualties from one position represents exceptional combat effectiveness. The disruption to enemy logistics provided measurable operational advantage." He stood, walked to the window, looked at the snow-covered Belgian countryside. "Here's what's going to happen. Official reprimand in your service record. No court-martial, no reduction in rank. And we're forwarding your case to division sniper training for tactical analysis." Romano looked up. "Sir, if your methods prove replicable under specific circumstances, we may need to revise doctrine." By March 1945, the Army had published revised sniper doctrine buried in Section 7, Subsection 3, Paragraph 4. In defensive positions with confirmed friendly support and favorable terrain, snipers may maintain static positions beyond standard three-shot limitations, provided continuous reassessment of enemy counter-sniper threat. Legal permission to do what Romano had done. The manual cited combat analysis from winter operations. No names, no specific battles, just acknowledgement that sometimes staying put killed more enemies than moving. Romano never saw the revised manual. By March, he was teaching other snipers at division headquarters. He trained 43 men between March and May, taught them tree positions, sightlines, patience, cold weather survival. "Don't be stupid," he told them. "Static positions are suicide in offensive operations, but in defense, with proper support, sometimes the best position is one that doesn't move. You have to know which situation you're in." V-Day came May 8, 1945. Romano rotated home in July, discharged in August, back to Brooklyn by September. He got a job at LaGuardia Airport as an aircraft mechanic. Married Teresa D'Angelo in 1948. Had 3 kids, lived a quiet life. He never talked about the war. Every year on December 20th, he called Patrick O'Brien. They'd talk for 20 minutes about families, jobs, regular life. Sometimes O'Brien would say, "You still crazy?" Romano would answer, "Every day." Neither mentioned the oak tree or the logging road. Didn't need to. Vincent Romano died February 3, 1997, age 74. Heart attack at home in Brooklyn. They buried him with military honors, flag on the coffin, 3-shot volley, taps. The obituary mentioned his service. World War II veteran, 99th Infantry Division, European Theatre, survived the Battle of the Bulge. No mention of logging roads, no mention of oak trees, no mention of 87 men killed from one position. Just another veteran, remembered by family, buried with quiet dignity. But the oak tree is still there in Belgium. 60 years of additional growth, but the same tree. 3 branches intersecting 40 feet up. Perfect position for watching a road 830 yards distant. Nobody remembers why that tree matters. Just another oak in a Belgian forest, home to birds and squirrels. Not a memorial, not history. Just a tree where a Brooklyn dockworker's son spent 3 days doing the hardest thing soldiers do, staying in place when everything says run, firing when everything says hide, trusting that killing enough enemies will save enough friends to make the risk worthwhile. That's how one sniper killed 87 Germans in 72 hours. Not through luck, not through superior equipment. Through understanding that sometimes the deadliest weapon isn't the one that moves fastest. It's the one that absolutely refuses to move at all.